Why don't we get started? We wanted to thank everyone for joining us today in our March food system advocacy call. I am Elizabeth Tewin, for those of you who do not know me, and I'm here with other Food Council staff members. Anne Marie is going to be co-facilitating this call with me. We have Lorian and Bita on the call if you want to raise a hand if you feel up to it. We have a pretty singular agenda today, and that is our county budget and participating in the county budget process. I think we wanted to start off the bat by saying we hope that this is a conversation. I think in a lot of our virtual spaces, we come off the starting blocks with that hope. And I think Anne Marie and I just wanted to reiterate that we are very comfortable with uncomfortable silences. We hope to get feedback. We hope to share ideas later on in the call after we get some information out to you. And so to that end, as we're talking here through some slides and just orienting everyone to the county budget process, we might put some prompts in the chat for you to start giving some thought to. But before we did that, and actually I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can actually all be on the literal same page here. There we go. Can everyone see what's going on there? And Emery, if you could just say yes or
Yep.
okay, because I can't see anything. Before we get to the real topic of the day, we did want to recognize that we are still in the middle of our General Assembly session at the state level. And so I did want to hand it over to Anne Marie to give us a quick update on where things stand there. And if anyone has, again, feedback or items to share there, we invite that. Why don't you go ahead, Anne Marie?
Sure, yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. So just a quick update, and this will look familiar to you if you receive our advocacy newsletter. But we have just recently passed crossover day. So this is a key deadline in the legislative session, marking the point when a bill must pass out of its chamber of origin, either the House of Delegates or the Senate, and cross over to the other chamber to have the best chance of becoming law. If a bill hasn't passed its original chamber by that date, it can still technically move forward, but it becomes much harder as there's less time for review and amendments and final approval in the opposite chamber. But again, this just gives us a good sense of which bills are getting traction, helping to prioritize advocacy efforts for ones that are, still in play, and shifting the focus to the second chamber. So we'll share some updates that have come our way. I'm not going to review all of these bills, but there's a summary here, and we'll be sharing the slides after so you can look at them at your leisure. But Elizabeth, if you can go to the next slide. Two that I did just want to mention that, we've been watching in the food security space. And first of all, much thanks to our friends. Much thanks to our friends in, there we go. At Maryland Hunger Solutions for providing a number of items in this summary during Monday's Maryland Healthy School Meals for All call. So CEP expansion, that has not moved. It doesn't mean it won't, but both committees and committee chairs were very supportive of the bill, but there are obvious budgetary concerns with that expenditure. So not sure if that is going to move. For the SNAP for refugees and asylees bill, the IRC, and when I mention the IRC in this space, I am talking about the International Rescue Committee, led this effort, and they mentioned Sorry, just getting to my notes, which of course disappeared off this. But they mentioned after the hearing that though it didn't move, there is potentially going to be a work session over the summer on the bill. They also shared that other states took a lot of notice of the bill and it's influencing political legislation in other states. We did sign on to IRC's testimony along with 35 other organizations statewide. So hoping to see more of that bill in the future. Okay, next slide. Let's see, again, not going to focus too much on these. A lot of things that have not moved. Next slide. Okay. And just noting too that we had been watching in some other areas of our work that did cross over to the Senate. The first is a bill from our own state delegate, Laura Charkoudian, around local food procurement with MCPS having to publicly report on those efforts. So that did cross over. There will be a Senate hearing for that on April 1st. And also crossed over to the Senate a bill on dynamic pricing protection, which was of great interest in the grocery community, small businesses. So that is what's going on there. There's links to our legislative tracker, to additional key dates in the Senate session. And again, we will be sharing these all out. So that's our quick General Assembly update.
Thanks, Emery.
Mhm.
All right, jumping in. We do want to focus today on the budget cycle and our community's efforts to participate in this process. So we just wanted to quickly orient everyone to where we are in this cycle. You've seen it, this graphic as well, if you've signed up for our newsletter, and you should be aware that this is really a year-round process. Beginning in the fall with the county executives, community conversations and seeking input. We have first the capital improvement budget that takes over in January and February. And in March, the county executive submits his proposed operating budget to the council. And that is where so many of our food system investments are located, and why we are all so interested in what is going to be happening come April through June. The next step in this process is for council to hold public hearings. Those are scheduled in April, including an opportunity for the general public to give them our thoughts. That process continues with committee hearings, and eventually county council will vote on the budget by June 1st. So here we are in the CE's proposed budget land, just so we can kind of orient ourselves into what the entirety of the county budget looks like and where our slice of the pie falls. I think budget processes are so interesting because we have a pie that we have to slice up, and it feels like a very give and take process. We will no doubt have and see great debate over the proposed tax increases and the levels of spending in all of these pieces of the pie. I think an interesting aspect of food system work is that you could look at a lot of these pieces and find a place for food system issues. You know, we do have transportation issues. We do have environmental issues. We certainly recognize a link between housing and food insecurity. But we are going to be focusing specifically on those programs that are food related. I'll pass it. Anne-Marie, do you want to take it over and you can sort of walk us through what's here? But we also recognize we have Kathy Nardi here from the Office of Food System Resilience, who could also give us a little bit of a rundown of what is in the OFSR budget this
Yeah,
cycle.
of course, of course. And yes, I will just say a few quick things, and then I will turn it over to Catherine, since she has the most up-to-date information, and many of you may have received an email earlier this morning from OFSR further detailing this. So I want to make sure you get the most up-to-date and the ability to ask questions if you have any. But I would say, what we're seeing here is just noticing that these grant programs, many of which are becoming 2-year programs, that the funding level is staying the same. So, I do, I think it's important just to point out in terms of advocacy that, really kind of sharing your experience with legislators about what that means, when not only the rising costs of food itself, but also rising administrative costs, operational costs. We know that there are many residents now that may be seeking delivery who used to come out to distributions before. There are rising costs associated with that. So I think this really is an opportunity to share that information that may, otherwise not be front and center on minds, with the obvious focus we know, and we're very thankful for the budgets that have been released in the past and the supplemental funding. But again, just kind of really providing that education on what those other costs are that keep rising along with food to provide these services. And I will actually ask Catherine to step in, not on that comment, but just to answer, to share some factual information about this budget breakdown and answer any factual questions that you may have.
Sure. Thanks so much, Amory and Elizabeth. Thanks for including us in today's call. Um, as noted on the screen, and as many of you may have received from us earlier today, our recommended FY27 operating budget has a couple of minor shifts. You can see that funding is the same for our community food assistance grant program, our nutrition benefits outreach grant program, and our school-based food assistance grant program. There is a slight decrease in funding in the recommendations for the food as medicine grant program in FY27. I will note that in the FY26 food as medicine notice of funding opportunity, we have a graduated match requirement for grantees between the FY26 initial 1-year program period and the renewed FY27 program period. So in theory, if all grantees are meeting the graduated match requirement, that would help to offset the decreased total grant funding budget for FY27 for the food as medicine grant program. There's also a shift in funding for our resident and community gardening grant program. There will actually be an increased budget for the resident and community gardening grant program from FY26 into FY27, and I'm looking at the open budget page now because I believe the shift is actually from $200,000 in FY26 to 350 in FY27, but I can clarify and follow up with you all afterwards if that's the case. But there is an increased budget for the resident and community gardening grant program in FY27, and that is due to the fact that we will be expanding the scope of that program to support the inclusion of nutrition, cooking, and healthy eating education in the programs. And yes, it looks like FY26 budget originally was $100,000 for the resident and community gardening grant program. That was increased to $200,000 through a special appropriation passed by County Council earlier this year. And in FY27, the resident and community gardening grant program will expand to a total budget of $250,000. That funding shift will be from the MC groceries or retail access pot of money over to the resident and community gardening grants. And this does not have any anticipated disruptions or shifts in enrollment that will occur in the MC groceries program. We will continue to support families at the same level, the same number of families, while also leveraging other non-county funds and investments to support continuity of services. So hopefully nothing too major to note in terms of the budgetary shifts, and we are happy to see continuity of funding at the same levels for most of our grant programs. Overall, our budget remains relatively unchanged in terms of the total operating budget from year to year. If there are any questions, you can reach out to me directly. You can reach out to our main inbox, ofsr@montgomerycountymd.gov. For any partners that are interested in testifying, the County Council will hold public hearings on April 7th and April 8th at 1:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. There will also be a public hearing on April 9th at 1:30 p.m. And there's an opportunity to testify in person or virtually. You can find that information on the County Council's webpage or by calling 240-777-7802. The OFSR team will present to County Council's Health and Human Services Committee later in April regarding the proposed budget, and we invite our partners to attend and support us during that presentation.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for sending that email over this morning. It's always helpful. It's very hard when the budget is released to kind of get some in-depth knowledge about what exactly that means for some of the line items. I do see a question, though, in the chat around the MC groceries request being lower than last year. I know you touched on that in the email, but if you could just, clarify the shifts and how that plays out.
Sure. So the way that we have seen the budget play out in FY26, we've been able to maintain stable enrollment and actually increase the number of one-time fresh funds codes that are being provided to residents on a case-by-case basis with our nutrition benefits outreach organizations and with the Community Action Agency. And so when putting together the budget for FY27, we were able to shift some funding that had originally been allocated to MC groceries to support an increase in resident community gardening grants without any anticipated impacts on total enrollment.
Catherine, I had a question, and we will get a little more in depth about how we're all going to be able to participate. So with some of that information that Catherine shared, we'll have some links and additional information for you all. But one of the things I think we wanted to highlight today was the ways in which we advocate. And I think one way that we don't often, or that might get overlooked, is just partners' interaction with OFSR. And I was wondering if you could speak to how the CE's budget proposal gets developed, and just what are the levers and how does your office get involved in that, so people understand how they can provide feedback, maybe before it even gets to this level.
Sure. So the budget process really starts in the fall. So beginning in fall of 2025, our office began to develop the FY27 budget recommendations. We use the data that we've collected through our grant programs and through our other initiatives to inform our budget proposal. We work together with our colleagues in the county executives branch, with our colleagues in the Office of Management and Budget, to create a final budget proposal that is then shared with the higher level decision makers in OMB and in the county executive branch. And then the county executives recommendations follow from that. So we are using the data that we collect through our Airtable submissions, direct insights that we collect through our conversations with partners to inform our budget, our budget proposal. So I would say, definitely if folks are interested in being more involved, that beginning in the fall is a great time to start sharing insights and feedback. Also, just continuing to submit reports on time and complete and accurate reports is really helpful to us to be able to provide a clear picture of what the need is and what the funds are currently being used to support so that we can really demonstrate to the decision makers what we need support for in the following year. Overall, I will say that it is not OFSR is not alone in seeing kind of a static budget from FY26 to FY27. That is kind of just the case across the board, that there is not really a whole lot of increased funding available.
Thanks for that. It looks like we have another question in the chat about how the budget reflects emergency spending that was needed in November. I think, and yeah, go ahead if you have any insight there.
So the emergency spending that was allocated in the fall was through a special appropriation. That was a one-time increase in funding due to the federal shutdown. We do not anticipate having another special appropriation. We are seeing that the Community Food Assistance Grant Program and our other grant programs have the same or very similar budget to the FY26 budget. So again, I think for those of you that are applying for any of our grant programs that have recently been released, including Food as Medicine, we will soon release the Resident Community Gardening Grant Program. We will be introducing or expanding match requirements to leverage non-county dollars to support continuity of services at the same levels.
Vita, would you mind, did you get my little message? Would you mind sharing the slides? It's a little hard for me to see everything that's going on while we're doing this. Thanks. And no rush on that, just when you get a chance. In the meantime, Anne-Marie, do you want to take over? Well, not a lot of information on the next slide. We'll get it up when we do, but do you want to sort of, any more questions for Catherine actually before we sort of move on?
There was a question in the chat about the school-based funding. I thought that was the same, the 2.3.
Yes, I'm not sure, Brenna, if you could elaborate on where you saw that.
Yeah, I thought that I had seen in the OMB document there was like an additional $150,000. But I could be misreading that, but I just wanted to check.
You might be referring to the enhancement of 150,000 for food systems education grant program. That is the additional 150,000 that will actually go into the resident and community gardening grants in FY27.
Thank you.
The school-based food assistance grant program is anticipated to have the same budget as FY26, and actually our FY26 school-based food assistance grants were framed as renewable grants. So we had anticipated just being able to renew existing grant agreements with current school-based food assistance grantees at the same levels and similar or same scope for next year, pending data collection from the schools in terms of what their needs look like.
Thanks for the question, Brenna.
Yeah. So just moving on to thank you, Catherine. Just moving on to, other items that we know are connected to food systems, although not under OFSR's budget. There is the FY26 special appropriation that seeks to add $143,000 to the senior nutrition program. That is something that had been challenged with keeping up with rising costs over the past number of years. So again, that increase is slated to go through. And Elizabeth, I think you were going to talk about Community Connect.
Oh, good point. Yeah, good point, Dana, about the hubs. Just quickly on Community Connect, we do note a substantial investment in this platform, which is a county-run system of trying to consolidate applications and accessibility to county programs through a single portal. So things like Care for Kids and other county programs are being included in this. And we just raised this particular line item because the Food Council and many others have been involved in a lot of different community efforts to coordinate services generally. And we just highlight that as an interesting area that I think will see a lot more attention. And I think the question that we raise is how we, as food system organizations, particularly those providing food assistance and other wraparound services, really connect to healthcare, to other organizations providing services to the same client base that we are dealing with. And how do we as a community all do that a lot better? I think a lot of the from what I understand, a lot of the interest in the recent nonprofit strategic planning grant had some proposals that were geared towards a more common referral system of some kind, creating more partnerships. And so we just note this as an interesting investment in where the county is going in its efforts to try to consolidate some of these efforts to link households to multiple resources. So just throwing that out there, and it is something I think that we all as a community will be engaging in some way, if not in the formal county budget process. But here we go with the county indicating an interest in doing some good work in that area. Could you go to the next slide?
And Dana, I did see your question in the chat about the hubs. I'm looking for that now, but that is a tie-in to our next budget issue, which is around the inflationary adjustment for nonprofit contracts of 2.5%. And more advocacy is being done in this area by Nonprofit Montgomery. You can follow that link for more information on how to engage in that process. But while we know that much of what's happening in the food security space is happening through grants and not through contracts, we did want to raise this as an important issue because there are other resources and services that are provided to nonprofits, by organizations that do get contracts. And as a result, we may be losing out on some of that. So again, just reaffirming to county government what organizations really need to operate effectively. And the fact that there aren't, an increase in grants, indicate that there's really not consideration about the increased nonprofit operating costs. I will say about, just tying in with the hubs, those are contracts. So again, if they are getting an adjustment that doesn't really reflect, their actual operating costs, how is that going to decrease the services they can provide, and what trickle down effect will that have, on other organizations operating within the community? So just wanted to be sure to highlight that here.
Sorry about that. I have a leaf blower outside my window here. I don't know if you can hear that. Now that we have sort of gone through the nuts and bolts of the dollar amounts, what we're talking about, the programs that are out there, we wanted to talk a little bit more about what we as a community can do to influence how the county invests in food system issues. I think we all can recognize the privilege we have of being in a county that does invest in this kind of work. And I think we all recognize that not everybody has the same opinions about how government should get involved. I think we as a community see great need and see great need for support for the organizations that are doing this work. And so we as a food council really want to encourage our partners and the folks that we work with every day to really come together and be a presence in this budget cycle, in this opportunity to really tell government in a very public way how those dollars affect what we do and what we need in order to serve our community better. We've just asked a couple very simple questions here that we will answer in the next half hour or so, 25 minutes. But the question why now is something we kind of touched on a little bit earlier in this call. It seems very obvious answer to this is, well, we've got a budget in front of us and the county council is going to vote on it and then dollars will be allocated to programs. So why not now? But I think over the past few years, there has been this sort of sense, and sort of to AK's question about special appropriations, that the money's there. And so if it doesn't get passed now and we really need it later on, maybe it will come. And we have been very fortunate that the county has been in a position to react in times of crisis. So we certainly saw it in COVID. We saw it this past fall with the government shutdown. And again, a place of privilege in order to get those resources out to the community. We have been hearing nothing but sort of doom and gloom messages about the state of revenues at the state level and at the county level. And I think we all have to start really considering that in the future, resilience means planning for those emergencies, those crisis events now, and the additional funds might not be there. And so we really do have to harness this opportunity to make clear what our work means to this community. And we see value in doing this in a coordinated way. We're very appreciative and are very much looking forward to the work that Brenna and AK and the Food Justice Coalition are doing. Paramount to this process and to this effort is the voice of the people who are most affected. And so we really applaud their organizing around food justice issues and really pursuing a policy or pursuing, advocacy efforts that really push the envelope. The other piece of it is what the organizations are doing, to help serve those in need. And so while we as organizations do need to raise the voice of our own clients, that is critical. That is what lands, that is what county council listens to. We also have a voice as organizations that are doing this work, and I think have a valuable story to tell in what it takes to do this work. And so I think we are all seeing a need to, by all, I mean the people I talk to on staff here, about a more coordinated effort among our partners to do this kind of work. Anne-Marie, do you want to share reflections on last year and what you saw, which you as you sat through all of those budget hearings?
I feel like some of us should have I survived the gas leak at county council during the hearings last year. Yes, my back got quite the workout of 3 days of hearing. But what I will say, and I did see, some food assistance providers come out and share their stories. Some folks just come out and be in the audience because presence does make, make a difference. Thank you, Mike. We might take you up on those. But uh, but I will tell you who I heard from a lot, and that was Parks. And I don't know what they did or how they did it, but I feel it felt almost like every other person coming up to provide testimony was speaking about what Montgomery County Parks meant to them and how it affected their lives and how any potential budget cuts, could really disrupt those services and how that would affect people. And Stephen, I see your hand. Did you testify for Parks as well? I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute, Stephen. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. I've done a lot of lobbying at the federal level, and you're talking about having a more coordinated approach. And I'm going to ask you a question that you probably don't have a specific answer for, but there's an attorney somewhere that will have an answer. Are there no limits on the advocacy that we can do around specific legislation? Because a budget bill is specific legislation, just like an authorizing bill is. Given the fact that the Food Council is heavily supported by the county, and we are county grantees, and I've been trying to read up on this and make sure that I know if there are any, we can't get involved with elections at all. That we can't do. We can tell war stories, which are helpful, particularly if we tell our own, I think, representatives or the at-large representatives. But what do you know about what do we have to be careful with, if anything? Knowing that you're not an attorney, but I still would appreciate your insight.
Elizabeth is trying to duck from the fact that she is an attorney, so I'm going to turn it over to her, but not
Oh, okay.
necessarily on local council.
I am an energy attorney, so I can answer all your electric bill questions. But but I will say the first thing that comes to mind is you can't use county funds to then go do advocacy before the county, and that sort of begs the question, well, how do you support these efforts? And that begs the question, shouldn't we have an advocacy call around this and maybe have a discussion around that at some point? And that is definitely a plan. I think today we want to focus on the budget questions before us. I would also point you to the resources that Nonprofit Montgomery has shared in the past through our call, as well as on their own website, about really how to advocate as a nonprofit. And we can certainly include those resources that we shared last fall in the follow-up to this call as well, just so everyone is kind of refreshed on those rules, myself included. But I think, before we dive too much further into that line of like what we can and can't do, I think it might be good to sort of understand what we mean by advocacy. And, we are talking about some very specific steps that we would like to take in the next month. And we want to go over how to take those steps. But more importantly, what is our messaging, or how can we learn from one another on this call about how to tackle some thorny questions around advocating as a group in a budget process where we are trying to serve residents and see a lot of different needs that need to be served. So we wanted to just do a quick poll here, very scientific with this sample, about how you may have participated in advocacy around the budget in the past year. We're specifically interested, so if folks could just, I'll walk through it, but these are sort of all of the ways that we have thought about what advocacy means. And there are so many more ways. This is not the only way to define it, but we are interested to know if anyone in this call actually testified in person last year. Did you send out or encourage the people you work with to testify and tell their stories? Did you attend the budget, at least be a participant? I think there's value in being in the room and being seen as a community. Did you, because you're so busy, like all of us, have to watch it online and keep tabs on what's going on between meetings? There's also opportunity to supply written or audio testimony, and wondering if anyone has taken advantage of that. And then, there are the opportunities to do sort of more small A advocacy. Curious to know, have folks gone to county council or to the county executive and had one-on-one conversations with what your needs are specifically around, investment in your organization or the work that you're doing? And then there are the advocacy groups, and participating in our call and learning is one aspect of advocacy. And then finally, we are just curious. In the past, the Food Council has invited others to sign on to written testimony. It's something we would like to do again this year. We recognize that nobody should be signing on to anything they haven't written yet. That's the one legal piece of advice I can give you right now. But if you were interested in that kind of effort, we would certainly want to put that out there for folks to take advantage of. And Dana brings up, I'm trying to keep track of the chat here, Brenna. Brings up a good point about the opportunities to participate in hearings. And thank you, Catherine, again. Yeah, we've got slides on this, and we're going to get to like how people can go ahead and do this in a second. Is there value? Do you want to, has the poll stopped? Did we want to share out sort of where we are here? Okay, so, out of the 9 folks who participated, this is interesting information to take back with us. We are hoping to see more people in person, and we're hoping that people are not afraid to voice their opinions in public. The question I guess we had, and we had sort of raised this last year, was, do we as a community want to pick a date to all show up and support our community of folks who are testifying? It looks like Brenna is going to be there on April 7th at 6:30. I suspect Anne Marie will be camping out again. But that is something we could consider. Are we good on sharing the results? Is everyone still seeing that, or is that?
No, I stopped.
Oh, you stopped. Okay.
Yeah.
It keeps popping up on my screen.
Sorry.
And I guess in just the last remaining minutes of our call, the last 15 minutes, again, this is where it gets to the uncomfortable silence if necessary. But we just wanted to get your thoughts, gather your perspectives on what common messaging we could be sharing. Are there themes that we as a community need to raise around food system issues? And I say that recognizing that this is a call about the entire food system, recognizing that the food system is made up of very interconnected components, but that a lot of the investment we're talking about here now really is around food security. And so I wanted to just start off the conversation with a real head scratcher. Well, the first question we had was, what are the benefits of advocating as a community of food system organizations? I think we tend to oftentimes go about our business. Maybe we are thinking about what our own organization needs. And so throwing out generally the question around what benefit do we see in coming together to do this? And then I'll just put out the second question so we can kind of think about this. In the face of funding scarcity, where we are continually hearing that budgets or resources are drying up, how do we as a food security based community talk about the basic needs of our residents and advocating for food dollars? Vita, if you want to just stop sharing right now, it'd be maybe nice if we could just all sort of open up the discussion for anyone who feels like they want to share a message that they think is well worth raising to County Council. These are ideas that we want to take with us if we are going to share out some common or a sign-on opportunity, but also just to get people thinking if you are going to be testifying on your own, how that might look. Yeah, Steve.
I just became aware, which I'm surprised, I thought I knew everything already, that a family of 4 needs between 6 and 8 pounds of food a day. And here we are in our Living Faith Lutheran Church giving out 30 pounds of food every 14 days. Now, you do a little simple math there, and we're only probably hitting 30% of the need. So I think one of the messages, it really is a safety net. And it's not like it's superfluous or excessive or unneeded funding for the most at-risk populations. Even when we're running high efficiency, we're not throwing food away. We're hustling always. And so we could probably develop some pretty interesting testimony about the efficiency of our program, both individually and collectively. All this volunteer labor that goes in there, people spending their own gas, people collecting money from their own constituents, people that are getting food, volunteering to work free. I think there's, in this poison environment we have now, some positive stuff that even goes beyond the numbers could get us a little bit off the ground in relationship to all other requesters, maybe.
That's a great point.
Yeah, Stephen, one way to visualize that I've done in the past that we could do as a council here is like for every dollar the county puts in, this is how much is being generated, or this is how much, like you said, all of the gas, the volunteer hours, all of those things, and putting it in perspective that this is a very small investment that the county can make that brings, multitudes of benefit to the community.
I think that's a lovely way of putting it into a positive, like how we are amplifying county investment rather than it's a bunch of volunteers and we need to, we need more money to support all this. It really does show the community spirit and the investment that voters are putting into, their constituents are putting into these efforts. Yeah, Dana.
I think that, connecting this to social determinants of health and the fact that when you're showing the housing budget, if housing was not so expensive, if we had first more supply and more good, affordable housing, the needs for food assistance would not be as great. That is the number one reason that many people are seeking food, is because they are not making enough money. And not everybody is getting the nice minimum wage that we have in our county, but the minimum wage in our county is still not a living wage in our county. So the more we can emphasize, I think, what the real costs of living are here, and that many of the people we are serving are working, but they're struggling. And and then you add in all the people that we've all been serving who have lost jobs because of all of the federal cuts and so on. And I mean, I know the council knows all of that, but I think we need to emphasize that the food is just one piece of an affordability crisis. And I think we need to focus on that affordability side of things, that it is such an expensive place to live across the board. Whereas childcare is another, there's all these other things that are, when we because when we're interviewing people and we're sorry, well, not only in our surveys, but with our financial assistance, we're seeing people's budgets and seeing that budget for food is really being squeezed. And we know that. And so I think obviously we need to be advocating on the housing side too. And I saw that graph, I was like, it's such a small, and that tells you why, right? Part of the problem is we're still only putting a small amount of funding into housing into affordable, actual, real affordable housing in our county.
Yeah. And I mean, not to weigh into the politics of our education budget, but when you see that, I mean, it's almost like when you see the federal budget and the military, it's like so much funding goes into what is admittedly critical and another piece of what is going to make people's lives easier if we have a better education system. But yeah, it's just another push and pull. Anna Rose, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to has a question about curious about how the county determines what agencies to increase the budget for and what agencies keep the budget as same or less. For example, what is their strategy with keeping OFSR's budget the same and increasing public safety budget by 30 plus million? I welcome anyone with insight to weigh in on that, but I will say what I have. Go ahead, Anne Marie. Did you have?
No, I was going to say, I feel like I have enough information to be dangerous here, but last year I did attend one of the CE's budget sessions, early on in that process where he explains in great detail, what goes into each component. And there are certain budgetary items like MCPS where you literally cannot fund it less than you funded it the year prior. So there are certain mandatory statutory requirements, whether it's coming from the federal government, the state government, of things that have to maintain a certain level or go up, each year. Again, I do not want to claim knowledge of knowing exactly what all of those are. MCPS is one that stuck out with me. I know there is, though, a lot around the emergency services as well, like you raised, Anna Rose.
I mean, I feel like I've also just heard anecdotally that you have to show up and be seen and be heard. And if you're not, then if county council doesn't hear from you, then they won't pay attention to the things that are important to you. I don't see I don't have data on a direct correlation in terms of advocacy efforts and what that yields a certain agency or a certain slice of the pie. But I think that's why we're urging folks to, be more active and be more seen as needing an increase here. I think, that goes back to like what it costs to provide the services that these organizations are providing. And we do rely heavily on a volunteer workforce, but that requires support and funding as well so that we can rely on those volunteers. So I think, that's a part of it too, is being seen. Just 1 second, Stephen, because I did have another question and I just wanted to ask, because we hear so often and know that stories are so important. We also have to ask ourselves in this environment, what do we do when folks are too afraid to come forward with their stories? I just throw that out there for those who may have come across this. I know we often are asked repeatedly for our SNAP clients to talk about things in the public, and they do not feel safe doing that. So just lobbing out the question, how do you all think about sharing stories of others or how to deal with that issue? Go ahead, Stephen.
I put a comment in the chat that when we do surveys of customer satisfaction in our distribution programs, we might ask them an open-ended question about why is this important to you? And we don't have to give their name, but if we say a client or a longtime client or something like that, I think that would be that's really getting the raw ore out of the mine. And those stories carry emotion. The other thing I was going to suggest is I know from my own work with Maryland Moms Demand Common Sense Gun Law, Action for Common Sense Gun Laws, we go show up in Annapolis with 350 of us wearing red shirts and all that. And we are told by the legislators, you just being here makes a difference. And I'm wondering, could we come up with some symbol or something that we could wear on a wristband or something that could be visible that would talk about our common priority without spending a lot of money? But there's a difference when you're sitting there wearing shorts and t-shirt versus when you've got a cap on that says something, hey, you can change the politics of a whole nation with a stupid hat. So we should be able to do something with something tchotchke or and maybe we can even have a working session ourselves on what should that be, and getting our own organization to say, yeah, we'd be okay being identified with that thing.
We have long had the t-shirt debate about what color we should be. Hats off to Brenna and her efforts with the Housing Justice Coalition around your t-shirts and banners and signs and all the work that you do to be a visible presence in that space. And we take that to heart, and and it might be a next year proposition, but definitely, I think what Stephen raises is the fact is a something to keep in mind, and that is that advocacy is a year-long exercise in collecting those stories all the time and not just at budget season. And so maybe at our next advocacy call, we continue that conversation, even if it is past the process of this budget cycle. I think what we want to focus on is like, how do we continue the conversation after this, and what effort we take in the coming year on a regular basis, and check in and keep on our task of being that greater presence. I do notice the time. AK, I know your hand was up if you had a quick question you wanted to raise, and folks are okay going about 5 minutes over. Or did we lose AK?
I know, I think my question's not, so no worries. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bita, if you could just pull those slides up one more time. We did want to just review so that everyone is crystal clear. Thanks to Catherine for putting that information in the chat. There is a wealth of information on the county's website about how to engage. And we just did want to highlight that we do have these dates to show up in person, and the deadline for signing up is April 3rd. We do note that these spots fill up, that we encourage you to speak in person and to sign up as quickly as possible. We will follow up this call with some of these notes and the resources we talked about today. It sounds like maybe April 7th at 6:30 might be a great date for us all to show up. And so we might just toss that out as the recommended time and place. But also encourage anyone to take advantage of these opportunities. These slides we will show up, we will circulate, have links here so that you can sign up where you need to. The other side of the equation is testifying in writing or submitting a video or some kind of audio. And we have provided a testimony template here in these slides, and we'll link that to the follow-up as well, just to give you a head start, an outline. I think, again, the lessons are the same, whether you're in person or in writing. You want to be clear, you want to be concise, and you want to highlight the real impact through data, through stories. But we do have a little template there just to help you organize your thoughts, as well as a link for where to actually submit that testimony. And just echoing what Catherine said earlier about the committee hearings. Again, it is about showing up and being a presence and being seen. And we appreciate the work that OFSR does to support this community and to be a steward of these funds. And so we want to, I think, show up to support and to learn from what they have to tell the HHS committee. So again, encouraging everyone to attend that in person or online, and we will share out those dates as we learn them. Thanks for sticking with us a few minutes beyond the 2 o'clock hour. Anne Marie, do you have any thoughts you'd like to wrap up with? I know there's a lot of
Yeah, I just had one really quick thought. Stephen had shared about, the decrease in purchasing power that it would be interesting to share. I think it's always wonderful. I mean, if there is a common number that folks could agree on and we could circulate, that's always best. But I do encourage you, I mean, many of you have been buying similar products for your pantries, for a long period of time. And I think this could really just be a very easy exercise of checking your invoices from, pick a month recently and comparing it to last year. And where did that get you? If you scale it down to the same volume to compare it to, I think that's a really easy way to just say, like, here's what that cost of food, has affected my ability to provide services.
We appreciate all the questions, all the thoughts and ideas that were put in the text in the chat. We'd love to continue the conversation. I have time now, so people have other thoughts or ideas they'd like to share, willing to stay on, but wanted to close it out for those of you who are off to do other things in your day. We will follow up shortly with notes from this call, what we learned, the resources we talked about, and we do hope to circulate testimony that we would love others to sign onto, and continue the conversation. So just looking at the chat again, we'll be adding new people to the list, and hopefully look for follow-up by this Friday. Thanks, everyone.